Morris, and one of our board members, Ann Bookman. Two of the students you will hear from today are my students in the Year of Your Book class, and two other students have studied with several of the wonderful poets the center invites to teach. It is not an exaggeration to say that one of the paramount missions of the Hudson Valley Writers Center is to help students publish the manuscripts that they work so hard on in our classes. We have had almost a dozen poetry students alone get books accepted during the pandemic. We are very proud of our students and our teachers for their dedication to the craft. Today, you will hear work that will move and surprise you. Poems about important historical figures and events, poems that explore and interrogate racism, misogyny, identity, science, addiction, recovery, terrorism, disease, and resilience. These are nuanced poems that show us what it's like to hold different emotions all at the same time. They are heartbreaking, hopeful, tragic, and inspiring. Many of these poems represent Stanley Kunitz's mandate. You must be careful not to deprive the poem of its wild origins. Please help me welcome these wonderful poets to the podium. Congratulations to each and every one of them. Take the mic. Cynthia, we
Yeah.
can't. Okay, great. We can hear you now. And whenever you're ready to start, go ahead.
Okay, got a little stomach ache, but I'm all right.
Okay, great. First, I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. I am so grateful to Jennifer Franklin for giving me a scholarship so that I could continue my work. And I will be forever indebted to Hudson Valley. My mother, the lunch lady. Each day at 8 a.m., my mother, the lunch lady, works the assembly line of newly made meals, each a stamp of mass, scratched from the unlimited land of heather and sunflower risings. She reaches home at 3 after a day of patriarchy whose offspring depend on her to be coddled, each her presumed favorite, a maid at school. Her face erased from her colored, marked body, universally misseen, misnamed. After school, I watch her in her bedroom, removing her school clothes, collecting her uniforms for the wash. Her handkerchief shaped like a doily on her uniform's lapel with the name Dot inside. I don't know her as this woman, a black woman whose birth is tied up in her labor. She labors for the small coins, to use her black body as surrogate for elevated white women who insist she nourish what their whiteness has wrought, manage their childish fears. Miss Anne said, "Be Hattie, be the wind, be Mammy for 8 hours while they are in preparation for future domination." They have the power my mother could not imagine. At home, Dot is taking what is not really quiet time, but in the slimmest of single moments, within the enclosing generational chasm of servitude and place. In these moments, she belongs to no one. She says it is her nerves to fight for her life in a life where she is owned by the state, her husband, her daughters, the church, the community who say that she is the very nice lady with a smile, who exists to serve lunch at this unintegrated school. The lunch lady with cancer, cancer that silenced, sank her until she retreated with her voice. The labor, the black female body she couldn't corral, but succumbed when home meant gone. Pottersfield. In the throat of Crownsville, Maryland, beneath the filament of pine and tobacco, reedy blue asters outline the old prison cottage for colored women held in parch and punishment. Forensics is memory. A sash of light from the Monocacy River arcs beloved, while maddish seasons dismember her station, hauled beneath the muck turned livid, on the edges of things like vindictive weeds or nervous trees, a cast even unto death, as though bone may copulate with bone. The history of gynecology. The enslavers cage the black girls first. They lop off the braiding and fingernails, which they place in a clamped gunny sack with oddments, nettings, peeled eyes, Negro repellent, disintegrated limbs, and assorted mason jars teeming with enslaved menstrual blood and scraped labia wounds for surveillance. Dr. Sims slashes the whistling gorges in the experiments he loves, the way a Hottentot scorches in a frankincense of fistulas draping the operating table. Only savage black girls possess a Hottentot. These savage black girls, under the tup of dismemberment, an unbraiding of the feminine, the braiding Dr. Sims thought baroque, an aboriginal juju, the elongated tufts from the black savage girl's pre-owned Hottentot, now fur pelts, dress the shoulders of his waltzing wife on alpine nights, while black girls, these savage black girls, Lucy, Annika, and Betsy, who possessed a mauled and ethereal Hottentot. Prepared mistress's hibiscus tea and tea cakes. However, Mistress Sims wanted something more. She inquired about these savage black girls, Hottentots, about the incense of the Hottentot. She wanted to rub it across her vagina to entice and woman. Mistress Sims craved the smell of the Hottentot. An African primrose the black savage girls possess. Such black savage girls. Lucy, 17, Annika and Betsy, both 18, did not avow pain because they lived through the fear of an ensnared fetal skull gashed in the birth canal, along with the assertions of 10 speculums. If savage black girls felt the terrorism of bloodletting, it was not known to them. The surgical apartheid covens continued to peel back each bark of black skin, an antebellum monogram, whittled into a napalm whirl. Their imperialized Hottentots on oppression tables as a storehouse of balm for white women among lacy sawn and Portland stone. This under the cedar cladding on the land side of percolation ponds, canted bays, crossing coves, and arched lunettes held by Doric piers with the burnt smell of Hottentot and Yah. In Virginia. In Virginia's room, her own Peruvian lilies light her desk with carefully placed pens, bought with her own words. The groovings in the desk waxed by Pearline, who at noon serves Earl Grey in a pink apron, carrying pink teacups, laced with lemon on its pungent lip. Delicate woman-sized treats for swooning. Pearline moves to the door to bring in the silk robe porcelain tub, camphor, salts, and tints of violet to balm Virginia's tuckered feet, unbend the curvature of Virginia's back, the enamored, coveted prose in Virginia's own. Pearlie, she calls, bring my notebooks and more tea. Pearline walks hard into the kitchen to draw the fires, prepare domesticity for the writer who needs a room of her own to subordinate her muse. Her maid who labors for Miss Virginia's ownness, her roominess. Virginia says the room frees her from the tyranny of man, her men, planters and industrialists. Pearline is asked to stay late to prepare refreshments for her writer friends, to collect their wet coats and dry them by the hearth, and pleasantly waitress their personalities. Pearline Agreeable prepares the table, embosses it with fairies and musing mermaids, tapered flickering. Nights when Pearline walks to her bus stop, fresh from clanking silver goblets of drink she has never tasted, goes to the butcher for the leftover shanks of meat closest to the guts of his porcelain body for her own family stewed victuals. At home, she draws the fire for her children's nightly bath, washes clothes for school on the morrow, braids their hair after all and sundry has been cared for. She walks to the pallet she shares and thinks of Virginia's ownness, the ownness that she, Pearline, keeps pristine from the tyranny of Mistress Virginia's men. And the first poem I read is All the Bushman's Horses. I am too busy looking for food to think about peace. My gun is how I support my family. I watch my neighbors turn to ash as jongerweed on camels kill our teachers. My children black at a school, days after Arab teachers left before the carnage. Too many horsemen marahaling at the Nuba Mountains. South is black and slave and infidel. Darfur cattle keepers, farm workers, domestics, women and children, pledged as gifts to Berbers, Bagaras, in our Sudan, land of the blacks. People shout for rain to stop the burn of skin against skin. I did not like protesting the crouching anger. It is not a recent thing. All the Bushman horses, it is personal. They force us to have sex with our fathers. The plot where my mother lives burned yesterday, gunshots and mutilations. The road out leaves behind fallen home fronts, errant livestock, old men with carts pushing makeshift chaperones, charred tires, and trash, a wooden chair, a doorknob, a girl's plastic belt, a child's cheaply colored pillow, a shirt turned brown for too much blood and shit. A watery shaped imprint of a shadow spreads the stubbled upholstery of clothes. I carry my mother's soul body. We leave without our voices. We only have stones. They have all the power. No one ever listens to us. 6 million cremated. Silence burns fur. 4 more years, they shout across the Atlantic. Thank you.
Hi. So I was thinking, I wrote my first poem when I was 7. It was in iambic pentameter. It was about dogs and train whistles, as I recall, and it rhymed, of course. So thinking of that as the beginning of my journey to get to this book, it took 63 years. This first poem I'm going to read is from the section of the book that is about my very long marriage and its ending. Affliction 1. The year I was afflicted with love, we took my parents to windows on the world to toast our oblivious happiness with Veuve Clicquot, while we looked out toward the future and down past any fear of heights, then skipped past fountains to one if by land, where I wasn't even bored as the men rattled on about American wars, and we ate beef Wellington in front of a fire. Now both marriages,
and that iconic building have burned into history. But new architecture soars, and love still bears witness with new lives, a life, alive. This next one was written on our 8th anniversary when we lived in Berkeley. The 8th year. In the outback of Australia, after 8 drought years, it rained. Survivors covered in mud shouted their faith in the rain, a wet religion, while the earth, dry but never barren, revealed buried seeds rushing up toward water. After our dry, quiet days, when we come together again, rushing toward tears until we are drenched, we live on what grows, sustained through the next drought, not by hope or even love, but by the inevitability of rain. Let's see. About a month after my husband moved out, I went backpacking in the Cascade Mountains with my sister, who's in the audience, and her ex-husband. And this poem is from that. It's called Affliction Two. The year I was afflicted with sudden separation, I put on a strapless dress because he once loved those shoulders. I accused him, a master of divinity, of not being Christian or kind. I was talking to an empty space and separated from myself, had to find a dry wilderness large enough to shrink loss. Hiking straight up to Enchantment Lakes, past Bitterroot and Bleeding Heart, I scrabbled across granite following cairns. Like Camellia japonica spreading its branches low to the ground for protection from snow, I would not break. This one I wrote after I started dating again. What's the worst that can happen? You meet for drinks, Pinot Gris for you, Pinot Noir for him, trade the usual blah blah while trying to get a read, a bead on each other. He's tall, you're thin. He's Jewish, you're not. He's smart, you're smart. It's like inventory at a human being store. You have buyer's remorse, reluctant to make such a big purchase again. Instead, you try an installment plan, but it stalls as you squeeze yourselves into calendars, fat with trips, children, doctors, dogs, baseball games, swing classes, legal conferences. At this rate, you won't even be holding hands until next year. And you're impatient to find out how a new body might fit your old body. Will they click into place like toy magnetic trains? Or will his skin grate your skin raw? Then he says, you're off the hook. He's met someone. Of course you're insulted. Yet you want to be alone with your own words, your ferns, white peaches on a warm day, feeling a tiny puff of air like a lover's touch. What's the worst that can happen? You end up being the only witness to your life, and 6 out of 7 days, you try to believe that's enough. On the 7th day, it's more than enough. This next section is about my son, who has struggled for many years. Furtive hours. An elephant sits in the mid-century modern living room, waiting for someone to ask, how do you do? While someone we love is slipping out a back door without saying goodbye. We hear a lock click open before we realize he's out running with foxes, silent burrowers, badgers and snakes, all those smaller creatures that will harm him as we are getting to know the huge gray beast. This next poem, I'm not a religious person, maybe spiritual, but I don't actually pray. And this one was one of those poems that was just given to me. So maybe I do feel religion now. Supplication. Oh Lord, hear our prayers. Hear those still unmoaning mounds, hear those still unmoaning mounds under newspapers on frozen streets. Hear how mothers of broken children, no matter how lost, keen silently. Hear each of us whose living skin has been flayed by betrayal and our own salted tears. Now, Lord, hear our cries of recognition, as we see you in a flaming leaf's spiral, incense rising above the coffin like hope, snow studded with red berries, this bright world. And now we get to the section of the book in which I discovered in 2018, the father who raised me was not my biological father. Undone. If you find out your father was not your father, do you fall off the family tree like a red leaf that turns to ground, as if you could unlove all the ancestors whose name you bear? The grandmother who wrote you a lullaby, the white-haired aunt who whispered dreams, the gorgeous uncle who died young? Where do you put their voices before you have nothing new to hear? Are they still yours, or must they be undone, unremembered, your second father's paintings unhung? This next poem is in the voice of my biological father, who I call first father in the book. I never knew him. He died before I found out, and he was 100% Jewish. So I discovered that I am 50% Ashkenazi Jewish. And I became fascinated by Yiddish. So for this poem, I think it's helpful to know that a dybbuk is a disembodied human spirit that wanders restlessly until it finds a haven in the body of a living person. A tumbler is an entertainer who combined the duties of a comedian, activities director, and master of ceremonies, often in the Catskills. And kavel, I'm probably not pronouncing right, is to be extraordinarily proud. First father speaks. I'll never call you daughter in this life. I'm a benevolent dybbuk, and you're a tumbler, entertaining your audience with a tale of three parents, weighing who knew what like a Talmudic scholar. Might as well cavil over alleles, blue eyes, the law of independent assortment. One crinkled brow, a gap in your teeth, what else? I remain beyond your arms, out of focus in old photos you can't smell or hear. You have to conjure me until I'm more than only half your DNA, like meeting a stranger you already know. Second father speaks. My squash partner and I are invited to dinner on Claremont Avenue in Morningside Heights, where my daughter lives in a 5-floor walk-up with a junkie from the suburbs and an intrusion of roaches. We sit on the floor of a windowless room, eat cheese fondue from an avocado pot. Robin is 18 and thinks she is worldly because of the gap year when she hitchhiked with a Vietnam vet to Switzerland. I wanted her to work with Margaret Mead, but she has a mind of her own. Sometimes I wonder if she is even mine, her small bones nothing like my 6'3" frame. I've taught her Prokofiev, osmosis, the Tao, to laugh at my dark, funny stories. When she got pregnant 3 weeks before graduation, I held her hand during the procedure. Now she's scudding away from me to other men, a husband, a different father. But tonight, she's still my daughter. I thought this one was especially appropriate and timely to read in light of the recent Roe versus Wade decision. Before and after Kennedy. I drove to Jones Beach with its Art Deco welcome sign, near the ocean's edge, brimming with green and white waves. The flawless shore was stippled with skittering sandpipers, plump black-backed gulls. I thought of my black-haired mother here, surrounded by her broods, sticky with ice cream and sand. Before the beach was crowded, before Kennedy was killed, before the brewing future became bittersweet. After Kennedy, we were still young and smooth-skinned. Golden songs of love or peace played nonstop as everything billowed into an unending summer night, each moment fraught with new, the scent of ginate, coppertone, matus, the utter innocence of first sex. Oh, Now I remember as if I never knew. We were pregnant, me at 17, my mother at 42. I went to a secret office on Duck Pond Road while she lost her baby on a Caribbean beach, the opposite of innocence. I just have two more. This one is, I wrote after unearthing a secret tape recording that our mother had made of a family dinner and I didn't know existed until recently. Oh, and one other thing that might be helpful to know is that I was named after an uncle who died at the age of 24. Family dinner, 1976. Everyone is still alive, talking about death. My not father says the first thing we should see every morning is a skull. My mother announces to the table that Robin's always been afraid of dying by 24. My father asks my age now, 24. It feels like a plague. He reminds me to guard against eagles that prey upon babies, his Black way of teaching me to be fearless. I can hear how I listen to him. My laugh the same for 40 years in this fearless afterlife. Grant telling me he is my true father. And this one I found recently and have no recollection of writing at all. I find a haiku written 36 years before my DNA test. Father of my years, you died before our talking, but it was a dream. Do I have time to just say one more thing, Jennifer? Okay. I wanted to thank the Hudson Valley's Writer Center for inviting me to read, but even more so for the offering such high quality classes and amazingly supportive, helpful, knowledgeable teachers. I've taken many, many courses here and the book wouldn't have happened without those. I'm also incredibly grateful to the friends and family, both my old one and the new one, in the audience and on Zoom, for all the love and support for my poetry and in my life. There are too many to mention, I wish I could, but I have to name my sister, Marlette Dellabough, for creating the artwork for and designing the book's cover. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Barb Jennes. I'm going to be reading today from a collection that was crafted under the auspices of Jennifer Franklin and the Year of Your Book Friday group. It's my first published collection. I've since have worked a second manuscript through the class, and we're shopping around for a publisher if anyone knows someone looking for a book. So it's called Blinded Birds. I want to first of all give a bit of a content warning because a lot of the poems, as Jennifer says in her blurb at the back, are brutally honest. It's a family history in verse of 3 generations of women in my family, my mother, my daughter, and me, all of whom have suffered from lifelong depression, 2 of whom were then subsequently became addicts, me to alcohol and my daughter to heroin. The good news is my daughter and I are both in long-term recovery. I have 15 years of sobriety in December, and she in August will have 8 years of recovery. So thank you. So there's hope. And I also just want to say for anyone who has a connection, either personally or with a loved one or family member, to depression or to addiction, I hope you find something that resonates with you in these poems. I'll start with the title poem called Blinded Birds. It's just a little reference of, or a little background on what that means or refers to. There's an old Flemish animal sport, they called it a sport, vinkensport, in which caged finches were goaded to read or to repeat the same song multiple times per hour. It was a competition to see which bird could repeat the songs most frequently in that hour's period. To get the birds to sing more devotedly or dedicatedly, they blinded them with hot needles. So this poem is a reference to that. Blinded birds. The Flemish blinded birds with fire-heated needles, they claimed it made the birds sing more beautifully. Lost in their world of darkness, undistracted by daylight, song swelled in the sorry birds' breasts like prayer. God heard and saw and did nothing, only marveled at the loveliness of these man-crafted mutants. He fashions blinded birds of his own, engineers endless misinterpretations of the master genome, experiments with alleles, entertains himself with quirks and tics, incapacitations, addictions. Lean closer, God. Hear voices from a world left darkened by your whim. Our hearts are fire-heated needles. We will not sing for you. Like many young people who are suffering from depression, I sought to self-medicate through alcohol very early in my teen years. And this poem, it kind of gives a little insight into that first encounter. It's called Every Bad Thing That Ever Happened to Me Happened When I Was Drunk. Every bad thing that ever happened to me happened when I was drunk, I'll say in retrospect. But right now, I'm 14 and 3 beers into a stolen 6-pack with Teddy Briscoe, whose tongue trembles and frolics after mine, whose saliva is sweet, and who pauses a moment to take off his glasses and bed them in the warm grass beside us. Music from the firehouse teen hop echoes across the lake, and while we kiss, a silent moon saunters across the sky. For the first time in my life, I felt normal. That's what I'll say, what we all say, giving a speech in the AA celebration honoring our first year of sobriety. But for now, it is truth with a capital T, and the awakening reward-o-meter in my brain is setting off alarms, red lights, bells, applause. When my father picks me up at the firehouse hours later, he asks if I stayed out of trouble. I want to tell him the truth. I want to describe the feeling of tumblers falling into place in a safe door, of rockets released at last from gravity's dark hold. I drank on and off for years. As Mark Twain said about quitting smoking, it's easy to quit. I've done it 1,000 times. But it was when I wanted to conceive my first child that I really got serious about sobriety. And this is a poem that kind of reflects on that. It's called How I Quit Drinking for You. Desperate belief on fertility clinic tables, amulets gripped under pillows. When my longing for you yielded only monthly blood, I doubted and raged, cursed a miserly universe. God answered, sent a sign as I staggered from party to car. A just hatched chick, featherless, pink, tossed from the nest, unnoticed on the sidewalk, a barely discernible crunch of frail calcium twigs. That night, I drained bottle after bottle into the sink's drunken gullet, set about building a nest that wouldn't spill its fragile contents. Imagine my hands untrembling, able to catch small falling things. I did eventually conceive. Unfortunately, I was unable to produce enough milk to nourish my daughter. She was losing weight, and the pediatrician said, drink beer. And I thought, gee, should I tell him? And I said, nah. So I relapsed very shortly after my daughter's birth. And this one kind of captures a moment of that. It's called Elky Mommy. You crawl over me as I'm fixed to the floor, flat as roadkill. You find the scene hilarious, clambering over this immobile mommy log. There is a dark humor to it. You have your little bottle, mommy has hers. You sit and smile, a toothless grin as bright as the too bright bulb burning overhead. This was great fun, you seem to say. Let's do it again, mommy. Not to worry, not to fret. The lesson has only begun. My daughter, throughout her teenage years, also struggled with various misuse of different drugs. She was treated by many different therapists for her depression. She went off to college and did 5 years at a wonderful college and was an honor student. And the month she came home, this is a story that reflects what we discovered. It's called What a Mother Does. 1, summoned by a husband to your pink room, there, a pale statue on the cold floor, face cement-hued, lips eggplant. At your fingertips, plunger, tube, needle. Below its tip, a grisly drop of blood, exclamation point, punctuating the end of life as we knew it. 2, death wooed you. You found him charming. He lay atop you and sucked the life out of you like cats stealing the breath of babies in old wives' tales. 3, I had imagined 1,000 ways for you to die. Swimming pool, kidnapper, allergy, tornado, bee sting, school shooting, electric shock, forgotten seatbelt, choking, hit and miss, carbon monoxide. But this death I did not foresee, could not prevent, could only hope to undo, a kite flyer doggedly chasing a runaway string. 4, I breathe life into you. Your chest rises, falls, but the brittle watch of your pulse strives for silence. I exhale again into the stilled bags of your lungs, praying they will snatch up life like a lost button sucked into a vacuum's ravenous throat. 5, now eyelids flutter, an enraptured smile curves your pinkening lips. Then horror, your eyes open, point in opposite directions. One looks at me, the other at the demon you adore. 6, you were dead and then you weren't. 7, this is what a mother does. This next poem is an ekphrastic. It's an allusion to both Peter Bruegel's The Fall of Icarus, the painting of Icarus falling into the sea, and also to W.H. Auden's wonderful poem, Musée de Beaux Arts. And I think you'll see, if you are familiar with either, you'll see references to both. It's called Eating Dinner After You Died. Just hours ago, I found you ashen and cold on the floor of your sun-swaddled room, the needle beside you as splendid in design, as lethal in misuse as Icarus's waxed wings. I did not witness your fall from grace, only hurried to a thud, as Daedalus no doubt hearkened to a splash. Such innocent sounds, onomatopoeias, merry in the mouths of children. I lent you lungs full of my half-used breath, swallowing fury and fear like poison prayers, waiting for sirens to turn up our street, to turn back time in a miraculous reanimation. Now you sit beside me and sip soup off a spoon with your pink again lips, swallow, stare at the TV, at the raging fires, caged children, the shot dead, the turned away, then sip, swallow, stare again. Even you, so newly scolded by the sun after aiming for an ecstasy not meant for this earth, your white legs disappearing into deep oblivion, even you, quite leisurely, turn away from disaster. Did Daedalus learn something about hubris as he watched his son plummet into the laughing sea? And what am I to learn from this echo of error? I crafted your wings from my own blood and hours. Tomorrow, the untroubled world will resume. The plowman will walk dully behind his horse. Expensive, delicate ships will hoist their sails. The fisherman will gaze lazily at a tug on his line. And only the fish ripped, gasping from the sea, the whipped horse, the scurvy-ridden sailor, the mother who wrestled Thanatos and now faces blame, will glimpse something startling and not turn away. The journey continues through a relapse and rehab and my own struggle through to sobriety again. This, I'm gonna just read 2 more if I may. This one is kind of a look back at the three of us, my mother, my daughter, and I, and how we were kind of inextricably linked genetically with these conditions, these diseases. And this one is called triple helix. Her sorrow, my sorrow, your sorrow. A braid of bad things runs long down our backs, tumbles down generations like a slinky toy on the stairs. She dulled her despair with dirt, sunlight in her eyes, a garden of growing things. But in winter, she was a dead leaf, tossed and dragged by every feckless wind. You and I opted for year-round solutions rather. You and I opted for year-round solutions to quell the gloom gurgling through our veins. Our pacifiers offered oblivion on demand. Now she is gone, buried in the dirt that once dissipated her darkness. You and I are left to untangle the necklace left behind in her joyless box of jewels. Daughter, let's pry apart the DNA that twists our fates together, separate the triple helix of eye color, childbearing hips, despondency. Let's cut our braids and go bald, brides leaving home for a new village, leaving behind the chattel of the past, carrying only our finest things. This last poem, both that I read and the last poem in the collection, was written as a result of a trip the three of us, my husband and my daughter and I, took to a place called Hovenweep in southwestern Colorado. It's a beautiful canyon which has many, many ruins from the Anasazi, the ancient ones, built into the sides of the cliffs. And she was very new to recovery at this point. I had been there for a little while, but this is a tribute to the two of us. Hovenweep. Here, the ancient ones farmed the mesa atop the rim of a meandering canyon, carved their homes, their silos, their kivas into the walls of steep sandstone cliffs. You and I creep closer to the edge of the maw, daring to see the crumbled ruins below. Holding hands, sure we will save each other if the ledge gives way under our weight. We smile and take another step and another. Even your father calls us back. Enough. But you and I know this ledge walking well. We've danced on edges of our own making, explored paths of exhilaration no one else could fathom or forgive. Danced alone as all addicts dance, even when our dances devolved into madness. And then you, a damaged daughter, saved me. And then I, a mother damned, saved you. Now the voice of a park ranger, godlike, calls us back from the precipice. Grousing, we stumble back, hide our relief. We did not really want to see how it ended. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, here and on Zoom. What a pleasure it is to be back in person at my poetry home at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. In the aftermath, 9/11 through a volunteer's eyes was written in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which will come to an end in a few weeks. So let me give you a background of how this book came about. Between November 2001 and March 2002, I was a volunteer at the Ground Zero Relief Project, the Spring Street warehouse that procured and supplied everything that the first responders and recovery crews needed at Ground Zero, from Christmas cards to candy to axes to aspirin. The warehouse was staffed mostly by volunteers in their 20s, with some exceptions, as you can see. And I left New York, my husband and I left New York shortly after 9/11. And when I returned some 10 years later, my family members forced me to go to the newly opened 9/11 memorial downtown. And it opened the floodgate, starting with one haiku. So 7 years later, 5 years in the writing, 2 years to be published, 9/11 happened to be published in my book, In the Aftermath. The book was launched at the New York City Fire Museum about a year ago. And if you're interested, you can still see the YouTube of that full reading on video. But today, I thought I would stick to personal accounts of 9/11. We've all seen the huge images and the television broadcasts and the videos and the films. And I want to talk to you about people who were then impacted by 9/11 then as well as now. And I'm going to begin and end with myself, beginning with the volunteer. I was afraid of you, your coat tainted by debris, pieces of metal ground in your helmet, your eyes, narrow slits blinking, reddened by sleeplessness and smoke, your voice, hoarse and thin from poisoned air, shouting over the din of jackhammers, your demands, wear the size 13 boots, stronger pain pills, afraid to question you. At first, find anyone today, then find anything today. Soon all my questions stopped. I sat on a crate in the back of the warehouse, pulled clothing out from donation boxes, labeled socks, t-shirts, work gloves, avoided you. Rope, shovels, cough drops. I tried to give you what you needed. Within sight of trucks filled with body parts from the World Trade Center, young women from Stern College sat in a tent outside the medical examiner's makeshift office, fulfilling the commandment to watch over the dead, regardless of their faith. This is called the Sabbath Shift. With my voice, I cry unto the Lord. She sits alone beside the trucks, intoning David's psalm. But she is not alone. Hip, hands, leg, from sunset to sunrise, sanctified by the Shomer's prayer. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. At the same time I was a volunteer, I was still working as an instructor in speech communication skills, both at a corporate and college level. So this poem comes out of that experience. It's called The Physics of Ripples. 1. Late again, 30 minutes tonight. He rushes into class. The door slams behind him, disrupts the other students. Sweat drips down his face, seeps through his starched white business shirt. His eyes dart around the room, scan the desks for a seat in the back. He apologizes, tries to look inconspicuous, avoids me, my rebuke, asks to speak to me afterwards. 2. After 9/11, my 2 little girls were followed on their way home from school. My neighbor's kids threw garbage at them, tomatoes, sometimes rocks, screamed, "Go back to Pakistan, terrorists." I drive them in the morning, but the babysitter who walks them home from school quit on us. She was afraid of getting attacked. My wife has a dental practice. Can't pick them up, so I have to leave work early to bring them home, stay with them until my wife comes home. But I need this class. My company sent me here to improve my accent. Please let me stay. 3, he dropped out by midterm. No relief. Narrow metal steps to the warehouse loft, bathroom on the left. The staircase sways, hard to keep my footing climbing up. He's leaning over the sink, washing up, stripped down to his undershirt and work pants. I tell him I'm sorry for disturbing him. Ask if he's done for the day, finished his shift, down in the rubble. Just came in to clean up, grab some sleep. Can't go home, have to dig, find my brother. When I got the report of the death of police officer Michael Hance on 9/11 Health Watch, which I belong to, I immediately thought of Elie Wiesel's play, The Trial of God, in which God was put on trial in the concentration camps. So this is called Trial of God, and it's in honor of NYPD officer Michael Hance, who died of 9/11 related cancer at age 44. Cruel God, hiding from him, biding your time, taking him away 15 years after he stood on the Bucket Brigade, passing pail after pail of debris and body parts down the line. Trickster God, goading him on, keeping him on the job long enough to rescue a little boy choking on a toy, but leaving his own 10-year-old to stand at her father's funeral with his police cap on her head. Humorless God, spying on him, seeing him dance down the street in his uniform, laughing, twerking with the revelers at the gay pride parade, letting him flaunt the joy of being alive. Deceiving God, holding him safe for a while, leading him to believe he had survived the pile, the gas, the remains, filling his brain with cancer in 4 months, offering his mother the flag that covered his casket. Ceremony. Stand up for the names. Try to make it to the end. Legs give out at G. And the final poem I'm going to read is not even in the book. It was written as an epilogue on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which I participated in at the New York City Fire Museum. So this is called 20 Years After. I thought I was done with the mourning, but we stood together in solemn assembly, listened to the invocation, the eulogies, watched the wreaths placed, the colors presented. I thought I was done with the dying, but I scrolled through their photos on the internet, post condolences, emojis, 50-year-olds consumed by poisoned air, toxins in the pile. I thought I was done writing their poems, but I took a few steps west of the Fire Museum to the site where the warehouse was, peered into the design center that took its place. My eyes shifted to the cobblestones where delivery trucks were loaded with supplies for recovery crews. The same water-swept driveway where firefighters hosed down boots, helmets, axes. In front of 304 Spring Street, bound by time to the stones beneath my feet. Thank you.
Oops, having an hearing emergency, excuse me. I want to thank Jennifer Franklin so much for inviting me. It's really an honor to read at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. And I want to thank Jennifer and Sophia Bannister for the amazing programs that they do all year long. And I want to give a special shout out to Mary Linder, the esteemed board chair of the Hudson Valley Writers Center, and all my fellow board members. It's an honor to serve with them. And I want to thank all the poets who read today. I'm just kind of blown away by these books. I mean, not only are they beautiful and powerful in their own right, but again, I do think it says so much about the Hudson Valley Writers Center that its students are producing such amazing work. So congratulations. So I'm going to read today from Bloodlines, which is my first full collection. I had published a chapbook called Point of Attachment with Finishing Line Press, which was a lot about the loss of my mother. And this book is kind of a continuation and a new exploration. This book is both a family history and an inquiry into our social environment, navigating the poles of fate and randomness. Specifically, it's about a gene that increases the chances of Ashkenazi Jewish women getting breast cancer or ovarian cancer. It's called the Bracha gene. My mother, my maternal aunt, and my maternal grandmother each died young from one of those cancers, although they did not know they carried the gene. It was only discovered in 1994. There is now life-saving genetic testing and screening available. And although my daughter and I learned that we are both carriers, we are grateful, both of us, to have excellent care and are healthy. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, not only was she unaware that she carried the gene, but as her cancer metastasized, she was not told. The 1960s were kind of a different time in terms of discussing cancer. Many women were not really informed about their illnesses or their prognosis. There was silence masquerading as protection. This book examines the impact of that silence, breaks through that silence through a series of 6 prose poems that start with my maternal great-grandmother and end with my daughter, and through a series of lyric poems that explore the mysterious and non-linear process of moving from grief to gratitude. So I'm going to start with the first poem in the book and then introduce you to my great-grandmother. I need my glasses. Migration routes. Bloodstreams channel a mystery, personal yet shared, transport a heavy leather trunk, prophetic genes, spliced memories, uninhabited dreams across the salt, slick ocean, unrelenting wave slaps. Invisible navigators confront turbulence, make landfall, set up camp, tents sway, ropes fray. Millions upon millions in flow, swim past liberty incognito. No one applied for entrance to my body. This is called Black Satchel. I have only one photograph of Rivka, my great-grandmother on my mother's side. She wears a long, dark dress. Buttons from neck to waist, ruffle of lace covers her throat, wrists. She poses for the camera. The occasion is obscure. Camera obscura, the darkened box, pinhole of light, objects partially revealed, upside down. Rivka stands behind a round table, white cloth with long fringe covering the top. On the edge of the table, a black satchel. She holds the handle with her left hand. She works as a midwife in her neighborhood, makes home visits to pregnant women and mothers with infants. This is her medicine bag. She carries alcohol, suturing thread, needles, scissors, and a small silver flask of brandy. Rivka and her husband Solomon and their two small children landed at Ellis Island in March 1893. Was this photograph taken before she boarded the Dresden, the steamer ship on which she traveled to America, or was it taken later when she lived in a tenement on Broome Street in the Lower East Side? Rivka died in childbirth at 30, escaping the illnesses linked to the Ashkenazi gene, never held her baby girl. I wonder who picked her daughter's Hebrew name, Chaya. I think of this motherless little girl, the grandma I never met, when we toast l'chaim at family occasions. According to the Torah, Rivka, Hebrew for Rebecca, was the second matriarch of the Jewish people. In the Song of Songs, Rivka is described as, quote, a rose among the thorns, so is my beloved among the daughters. The name Rivka comes from the Hebrew ribque, tie firmly, connection, a link, although some scholars have translated it as bind, trap, snare. In a book of biblical names, Rivka means knotted cord, so many threaded lives to unravel. Of course, I never knew Rivka, nor did I know my grandmother, Edith, who died of ovarian cancer at 40. The next two poems explore the theme of inheritance and things that we inherit beyond our genes. Handmade. Upward stroke of a sable brush, my mother painted rouge just below her cheekbone, feint of hand makes pale cheeks blush. Dabbing perfume drops with pointer finger twice behind each ear, the way her mother taught her. My grandmother's sepia portrait always in place on my mother's dressing table, altar of intimacy. I never knew her. I know her face as I know my face. Owner of the brass menorah, keeper of the family flame, I imagine my grandmother's hands gathering Sabbath light, her first name, my middle name. When I wear perfume for an evening out, I dab with my pointer finger twice behind each ear. What's in a name? I never knew her. This poem is called Scattered Tribe, which is actually a phrase that some of you may know from Stanley Kuniz's beautiful poem called The Layers. Scattered Tribe. I dreamt there was a band inside me. One player bowed a bass larger than herself. Another blew a brass horn on loan from an angel. A third played flute, pursing her lips, kissing each note goodbye, lingering over some like a lover, while children followed her tunes, her blooms, lifted off the ground by the music inside her magic. I dreamt there was a parade inside me. Pubescent girls carried helium balloons, released sun-shafted rainbow streamers. Mothers stood on floats, waved out windows of miniature houses, held homemade signs of hope. 10 grandmothers, all mine, marched to the beat of a long-legged drummer, held fast to their banner, both hands, stitched letters of belonging, belief. I prayed there was a fertile acre inside me. Women tilled soil, planted seeds, harvested maize, baked bread with no yeast, gathered kindling and firewood, ensured the flame never died, held a place open at every table so all who are hungry could come and eat. If summoned, I walk in a procession of mourners, wail behind a wagon. I'm going to read the first and last poems from a long series based on memories of my mother's illness. They puncture the silence I spoke about earlier by saying things that were unspeakable in my family. Rock, paper, scissors. Malignant, not benign, lymph nodes already invaded, the start of a war she never enlisted. The surgeon failed to find clean margins as though she had transgressed, written outside the lines of her life. At 13, no one I knew had breast cancer. Her first Sunday morning home from the hospital, she told me what they had done to her. Doctors do things like that? Short sentences, jagged pauses, deep breaths. I was numb. She was 41. Alone, scanning a catalog from Saks, staring at shapely young women modeling black and white brasiers, wondering if mine were big enough, I grabbed a scissors from my desk drawer, cut out their breasts one by one, page after page. Lost in Central Park. After my mother died, I could not say the word dead. I had not seen her die. It was possible she was still alive, maybe hiding, unlike her, traveling abroad. She would have told me. Had she wandered out of the hospital and gotten lost in Central Park? She could not have walked out. The last time I saw her legs, they were not my mother's legs. Muscles atrophied, small bundle of bones loosely wrapped in a sagging skin sack. I saw them by accident. Her blanket slipped before the nurse could catch it, so thin like twigs you could break with your bare hands. After she died, I tried to see her face, but all I could see were her chicken bone legs. They followed me everywhere I went. The second half of the book focuses on transforming grief and fighting fear and trying to celebrate daily life. As poet Ellen Bass says, all art is holding the tension between elegy and ode, between our sorrows, despairs, and sufferings, and the praise, wonder, and awe that we feel. This is called Elegy for the French Leather Wallet. You cannot consider yourself a New Yorker unless you have traveled the 7th Avenue subway, unless you know what it's like to stand so close to others you can hear people popping gum inside their mouths, unless you know how to grab the straps without losing your balance, without breathing until the next stop. You cannot consider yourself a New Yorker unless you visited the Met on a Sunday afternoon to admire the collection of Egyptian art, the reconstructed Temple of Dender, the tomb of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. She wore a false beard to assert her authority. You were scared to look directly into that slim opening in the stone facade to view the sarcophagus holding the queen's body, because she might not be dead. She might be alive, eating the food they packed for her in case she got hungry, ever. You know you are a New Yorker when you lose something personal, something valuable on the subway by mistake, or maybe it was stolen. You were never quite sure whether it was your fault. The time you lost your wallet, the one your mother bought you on her spring trip to Paris after her second surgery, the one she picked out for you because of the vermilion leather exterior, because you exclaimed red as your favorite color at age 3. You didn't discover the wallet was gone until you reached for your keys, until you were greeted by Frank, the balding doorman who repeated at every opportunity, I knew you when you were just a bit of a thing, and here you are wearing stockings and heels. You told him what happened, what you thought happened. He tried to console, but you already knew. You would never find another French leather wallet so beautiful, so vermilion. And this is Constellations. Orion's belt shines in 3-point precision as we huddle, eyes raised in the frigid crystalline air. Even the Pleiades have shed their hazy filaments, rejoined the company of breathing lights. Clearness is not about seeing, I want to lie with you, folded, silent, barely sleeping. I want the glow of meteors to course through our veins, the slow reflected glory of light years to extend our time. Hold me again as on a February night by Provincetown Harbor. Fill the sky with Latin names, animal heads, gods and ghosts. Undress me with assurance. Make the surface of my skin a celestial map. One unknown sun discovered. And I'm going to close with a poem about trees. I'm hopeful for trees. I think they're a source of repair for our broken world. This is called Hymn to be Sung at Astronomical Twilight. Lichen, all that remains green, clings to the naked stump. One piece of bark lingers in the dirt, survive the shredding, only to be trapped between decay and salvation. I heard it howl when they split the trunk into billets, heard the crass conquering laughter of the hatchet men when they first saw the wet sapwood in the middle. You'd think they discovered America. But you and I know that tree had no more chance of living among the rotting flesh of humans and mammals or the underbellies of ancient sea creatures than any of us. If you think it's hard to make out shapes and scents from decaying dirt, then wait till your eyes are used to the dark. You will see animal hearts and the skins of ghosts. You will see tender shoots and saplings, a grove of saplings like far off stars waiting to be born, waiting for the light. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful readers. Please, all of you, buy books. The writers will sign them if you're here in the room with us. And Sophia has put all of the information for you guys in the chat so you can buy them and get them or get them from your local bookstores. Thank you so much for being here. Bye, everyone.